Hello and welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time coming across us either on cable TV or on YouTube. My name's Tina Hurley and I'm the founder and executive director of a charity called Less Leg, More Heart that helps the people with disabilities in the community. We do that by 4 ways: peer mentorship, medical advocacy, we fund holistic approaches to care, and we fund services in the transition of someone from rehab and the hospital home. So today we are really excited because I have my first guest on this series, and happens to be a really good friend of mine, happens to also be one of the biggest names in the adaptive community. So super lucky that this fell the way that it did, coincidentally, to have my very good friend Scott Rigsby here today. He is a mentor of mine. He's someone that has inspired me in my journey, somebody that has a heart for everybody and is like really lives the all for one mentality and goes out of his way for anybody and everybody. So I'm just really excited that you are taking some time out in your quick stay up here in Boston to chat on this forum. And also I'm really excited to share with you guys some of the details about his story if you don't already know, and some of the tools and tips and tricks that he has utilized to go from what was tragedy to the triumphs in his life, and kind of give you a peek behind the curtain at what being like in this situation, being a bilateral below the knee amputee is like, and what you can do with the adversity in your life, like Scott has done. I mean, he's really just a beacon of hope for so many. So without further ado, I want to dig into some questions because I want to keep this short and palatable for everybody. So Scott, thank you first of all, and you can take it and run. I mean, I want to know, I know they want to know, how old are you? What happened to you? Where do you live? And how has this journey to disability been for you? And then we can get into all of your accomplishments, which could be its own segment.
Sure. So it's good to be back in the New England area. I was able to finish the Boston Marathon 6 times, so this area has real special meaning to me. I was actually there in 2013 when they had the Boston bombing. I was 3 or 4 miles from the finish line, and have been able to spend time with a lot of the survivors and encourage them. I'm 53. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been an amputee for 35 years now.
Which we were just discussing, was before the ADA.
Yeah.
Right? So
it was in 1991 was the American Disabilities Act. So the way I got these legs is I was an 18-year-old kid and I was sitting on the back of a pickup truck with 2 of my best friends from high school. We were working on a landscaping job before we went off to college. And we were pulling a flatbed trailer with 2 big industrial riding lawnmowers on the back. And we were loving life, and we were like most 18-year-old kids. We felt like we were invincible, and so we were talking about girls going off to college, and everything was going great. And as we were going back in, we had finished our job, and we were going back in for lunch. We had been on a small little 2-lane highway, very much like the kind of little country roads around here. The little back roads. We're heading home to our home base, and this 18-wheeler had been following us for about 10 miles and decided to pass us on this long straightaway and with this narrow bridge up ahead. And obviously he didn't know that there was a narrow bridge up ahead, and so the 18-wheeler driver moved over the yellow line to try to create enough room for both his vehicle and our vehicle. And it was kind of a perfect storm because the right front jack of his tractor trailer was even with our left front trailer tires. So you have a flatbed trailer with 2 tires on both sides and a brace in the middle, and that left tire, it was just even with it, it punctured that tire. So it caused this collision, made us slam into the side of the bridge. I got knocked off. I grabbed a hold of the side of the truck for a brief second, but I couldn't hold on. And literally as I passed by our trailer, my legs got lodged in between our trailer, and I bounced and hit up the ground. We were going like 45 miles an hour. My friend in the middle grabbed my other friend, or he would have been crushed between the side of the truck and the bridge, and then went to turn for me, and grabbed him and went to turn for me, but I wasn't there, so he started beating on the back of the glass to tell the driver to stop. But the damage was done. My life radically changed in 9 seconds. Because that's how long it takes to cover that distance going 45 miles an hour. But then they stopped the truck, got off, started checking me out, and there was a truck driver behind the one who actually hit us that saw everything. And so he said that when I hit the pavement, then I bounced up and my arms extended forward, but there was a rope wrapped around our 2 riding lawnmowers and I couldn't reach it. But he said that I hovered off of the ground for a football field, because you can take a pencil out in the parking lot and just press it up against the ground hard enough, and after a few short yards that pencil's not going to be there. Well, I shouldn't be here. But he said that there was somebody or something on the back of that trailer that was standing on the trailer holding my wrist off of the ground. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. So that was the kind of first miracle. And then we landed between 2 houses, because this was rural South Georgia, July 23rd, 1986. And before cell phones, before social media. So fortunately, we landed between 2 houses, and somebody was actually home at lunchtime during the summer. And so they called the hospital, which was only 10 miles away, when it could have been 30 or 40 miles away, and I could have bled to death. And then the kind of last miracle is that one of them is that the trailer tire that was flat, it was actually laying on my leg, and it was good because it was a tourniquet so I didn't bleed to death, but it was 6,000 pounds laying on me. So where in this rural farm country are you going to be able to get some kind of, with no social media, no cell phone coverage, but where were we going to be able to find some kind of vehicle to be able to lift this 6,000 pounds off of me? Well, out of nowhere, this tow truck showed up and lifted the weight off of me, and they took me to the hospital. And the surgeon who was in charge of the operation my evaluation and then eventual operation was a former Vietnam surgeon. At that time, the Vietnam War, it wasn't only like 12 years post end, and so he had, I was a walk in the park for him. But it was very fortunate. There were so many things that just lined up that worked in my favor. That night they would evaluate me, and then that night they wanted to take off both my legs, but my parents at that time in 1986, prosthetics were not as advanced as they are today, and there were only 5 prosthetic feet available to me. Now there are over 200. And so at that time my parents didn't know any amputees, and if they met any, then they were older people who were not active, and they just felt like as a young person, as a young man, this was just devastate me and I might not recover from it. So they begged the doctors to take off the right leg, and so they did that. And then the left leg, my calcaneus, my heel bone, was completely drug off. So I'd have bone grafts, skin grafts, and muscle grafts. And so this limb salvage procedure that lasted literally over 12 years.
And so for those that don't know limb salvage, it's basically, despite likely odds this is going to be a really long go of it, and maybe and know that it will likely never get back to good quality or like it was normal or in any great shape. It's just save whatever you can save for as long as you can go until I guess you can't do it anymore. How would you explain limb salvage to folks?
So back then people were just scared that, okay, once you take off a limb, I mean, you can't put it back on.
Not like a lizard.
So I'm not like a starfish, and so it's not going to grow back. And so people were fearful, and we are. I mean, the biggest fear that everyone has is the unknown. And so my parents were no different than any other caring parents. They were fearful of the unknown, and they thought they were just going based on what their knowledge.
But also they were being guided in the surgical teams too, because you had mentioned that
Sure.
everybody was looking like, let's save what we can, because it was a little taboo,
Sure.
the concept of losing a limb for quality of life back then.
Yeah, because back then amputation was just like the last result. I mean, somebody had to be almost dying, and at risk to their health before they would amputate a limb. But also at the same time, their quality of life back then was horrible. Somebody that would have a makeshift kind of man-made leg, because they ended up taking tissue from underneath my arm, part of my lat muscle, or skin from my thigh, bone chips from my back to actually create an ankle. And there were 17 surgeries in a year, and eventually there were 25 surgeries over a course of 12 years. And then when I was 30 years old, I was like, I have lived my 20s as a professional patient, and this is not the dream that I had for my life. And so I just wanted to be able to, get back to normal, and it fought so hard to try to figure out what my new normal was, but I didn't even like my new normal, and I wanted even a newer normal.
How did you, in a place where there's not a lot of people like you, and you are an athletic person, you're aspiring to be athletic, you want to get back on 2 feet again, but everything that you know is geriatric, comorbid, older folks, how do you in your head maintain the hope and keep that eye towards what could be despite everything that is? Because I think that we've made a lot of progress as a community with the adaptive community and prosthetics and being an amputee now. Paralympics are now, or the Paralympians are being paid the same as Olympians for the first time in U.S. history.
Yeah.
So there's a big movement. But back then, it would have been so progressive for you to have expected that you were going to have XYZ quality of life. So how did you come to know that you were going to do that despite everything?
It was kind of a thing that was both innate, but it was also nurtured by sports. Like my dad used to joke that he said, if somebody cut your head open, all these balls would fall out. A football would fall out, a baseball would fall out, a basketball would fall out. And so, because if I wasn't playing sports, then I was actually watching sports.
I think that's probably what a lot of folks that are going to watch would want to know too, is given the accomplishments that you have that we're going to get into, people would want to know, is this a new thing that you transitioned to after the devastation that you went through? Or were you just, like you said, I was an athlete my whole life?
I was an athlete, but you don't have to really be a good athlete to be a good athlete. If you're athletic, you are a competitor. That's what I think, somebody like Stephen Curry, he's getting tens, literally hundreds of millions of dollars because he has perfected his craft. But he's somebody that actually was born with this, and he's been very fortunate to cultivate that gift. I wasn't born with athletic talent. But I was the strongest guy on our football team per pound. So I always played with a big heart, and always played, 100 pounds more than I had on my frame, because I was very cerebral in that I would outthink my opponent, and if I couldn't be bigger than them, then I was going to be quicker, or I was going to be faster, or I was going to be smarter. But my head football coach, he put me in the middle of the defense. I was the smallest guy on the team, but yet here I am, a senior, and I'm playing right in the middle and I'm playing nose guard, right in front of usually the biggest person they have on the field is the center. And so every game that I played, I went up against a player that was at minimum 100 pounds heavier than I was. So I knew it was just a given that I was going to have a tough challenge, and that I just didn't get discouraged. And then I was also one of the players on the team that it didn't matter how far down we were. I always thought that we had a chance to be able to win, even if the seconds kind of were ticking off. My goal was to just go as hard as when I started, and then that way I can walk away as a personal achievement that, I don't have anything to be sad about. I gave everything. I gave my team I gave my coach, I gave, my opponent, I gave them everything that I have. I don't have anything to walk away. And so when my little high school football years were some of the greatest years of my life because it meant so much to me. I knew I didn't have the talent to go to the next level. Right. And then I had a special needs brother at home, so I had, of those three sports, I had to choose which sport I was going to play, and so I chose football. And so I learned so much from that sport. I learned from competing. I learned about not getting up, and I learned about big opponents, and I learned about how to, outthink my opponent. So part of what we have been through is figuring our way to overcome and cope and to not just survive but to excel at it. There's two things that we all have in common. Everybody in your audience has at least two things in common. It doesn't matter their race, their nationality, their bank account, their education level. It doesn't matter. They have two things in common, and they're pain and loss. Ours is very visual. Like people, if they were to see us at a store, they would know that, okay, something happened to those folks to cause them a great amount of pain and a great amount of loss. So there is a instant kind of credibility to relate to people because we all have faced that. A lot of people, it's not external, it's internal. They've had trauma in their life and they've had to overcome that. And that's part of figuring out how you make it in life is how do you deal with your pain and your loss.
And it's not always knowing what to do. I talked about that the last segment. It's just becoming what we call adaptable. It's figuring it out as you go and using your best, the best information you have at the best time, and hopefully with good tribe of counsel to steer you in the right direction. And I know that was something you said was critical in your journey too, is not only your upbringing, your faith, which is a big part of your journey, but also the folks that were around you. You can visit the pity camp, but I'm sure nobody was going to let you unpack there even if you had wanted to. Yeah. And that's huge. So then moving forward, so you went through this life-changing event with all these miracles that allowed you to survive it. And you're this athlete. Now, who is Scott without football? Who is Scott without his ability to run, walk, do things? And how do you get from there to being the first ever person to complete the Hawaiian Ironman on prosthetics?
It wasn't a short journey. From the time that I had this accident until the decision to actually do the Ironman was a 20-year span. During that 20-year span, it was a roller coaster ride. I had a traumatic brain injury. Most people think that the worst thing that ever happened to me is oh gosh, the guy lost his legs. I mean, losing my legs and wearing prosthetics is a cakewalk compared to a traumatic brain injury and all those things that go along with that. Here I am, I'm trying to do this endurance race, and because of my head injury, I have narcolepsy. I developed a sleeping disorder. So most people who have a sleeping disorder are not going to try to do a race that lasts 17 hours. So there's crazy things like that about my journey that, it's not going to be titled Unthinkable if it wasn't. I was 20 years past my prime when I got this vision to be able to do the Ironman. I didn't know how to swim without legs. I'd never ridden one of those fancy triathlon bikes. I'd never run the 0.2 of the 26.2 miles. So there are all these obstacles in my way, but I just flew in from Atlanta, and the way that I got here was resistance, because the plane that I was on, for it to be able to take off, it had to face resistance. If it didn't face resistance, then it wasn't going to be able to lift me and all the other nice folks that were on the plane and bring us safely here. It took resistance. I mean, that's a very heavy object, and it took a lot of resistance to get all of us and all our gear off the ground and land us safely. But that's how life is. We either allow the weight of that resistance to keep us grounded, or we allow it to actually lift us off the ground.
What a beautiful
and take
analogy.
us where we are.
Beautiful analogy. So how long did it take for you from the point of conception to getting across, the start line? How long was that building?
So in 2005, the end of 2005, the holiday season, I got the vision, this epiphany to do the Ironman. And like I said, even though I didn't know how to swim, didn't have a bike, one of those fancy triathlon bikes, or even run the 0.2 the 26.2 miles, or even 20 years past my prime, or even this narcolepsy, and I was working a dead-end job. I mean, I didn't have my family support because at that time in my journey, I had kind of just ostracized them. That, I had all these things up against me. So from the time that I started there, a year and 8 months later, I crossed the finish line.
A year and 8 months.
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
Scott. There are folks that are, so many folks, one in this greater space that hasn't, swam before, or, doesn't think that they can do it because they just don't project their ability being at that level. For those kinds of folks that are at a point of, contemplation, pre-contemplation prior to action, but seem to get stuck in that spot, what do you think? What is it that takes you from that idea to just absolute blind belief, I'm going to do it, full gas, no brake, go, fast lane? Like what can we switch on for people that get stuck there?
I think that we have to get to the end of ourselves, because, both of us have had people that have come into our lives and they have given us good wisdom. And at times we have ignored that wisdom just because we weren't at the end of ourselves in that part of our journey. And I know that that's a reality. For me, I wasn't really ready to hear what somebody was to say. But then when I think back on how, when I finally learned that lesson, this isn't, oh wow, this is new, I just learned this new. No, I could look back with clarity and see how 2 or 3 people had come into my life and spoke that wisdom in there, but I just wasn't ready to receive it because I hadn't got to the end of myself. People talk about getting to the end of end of their rope or the bottom of the barrel, whatever. I think, until you get to the end of yourself, then you aren't really ready to receive anything. You aren't in a place for other folks with great wisdom, love, caring, kindness, and knowledge of the road ahead, for them to pour their wisdom in you, because you're still full of yourself. Until we empty out ourselves, we can't be filled up with anything but us. And
no, it's true. It's hard to be on this side of it now, and of course we're still on our journey. I can speak for myself, where there are folks along the way that are just in their own way and are preventing themselves from greatness, and it's so hard to watch. It's so hard to be around, because there are so many folks, your story, some of my story, people that we know that are common to us because we're in this community, that defy impossible as a habit. And so for little things, it's hard to conceive of why folks can make so many excuses and why they can't get up and go do things when you have someone like yourself that is, just forging these crazy trails that no one could have ever thought folks should be able to do. Were you, by the way, told that you should or shouldn't in the medical community? Were you ever advised against the level of training you were doing so soon?
Well, that training, it happened 20 years. Yeah. It happened 20 years after my accident.
But with the narcolepsy, with all the medical things.
But yeah, with all the medical, I didn't really have anybody say that that it couldn't be done. I had a doctor tell me, like my first orthopedic surgeon, he said, you'll never be able to run again, which he was right, based on, this makeshift man-made ankle. He was right. But as prosthetics advance, my people would always like, wow, they always thought that this leg, because they couldn't see my ankle, it was in a shoe and a sock and a shoe on it, so they couldn't see my ankle, so they always thought that this leg was my good leg. But my prosthetic leg, as the years went by, was what became my best leg. And then they didn't realize that when I took off my leg, I transitioned from one good leg, one bad leg, to 2 really good legs.
So that's the part too. So 12 years into limb salvage, you get to the end of your rope, and what is that like, going from the mentality of trying to save the limb for so long at all costs, emotionally, financially, physically, to not going to happen?
Well, it was bittersweet because, good is the enemy of better, better is the enemy of the best. It wasn't even good, but in our life, we may have good, and it may actually be a place of complacency, because to give up good, we have to take the risk that there may be something better there. And maybe we've got something better. But you know what? Life has introduced us to the best for us. And this is the best for us. Like, there's a lot of folks in your listening audience that they found a mate. They probably dated a lot of good folks in their life. But you know what? Then they found somebody better. But then, the best came along. The best for them. And that person came along and they built a life together. I mean, it's no different than in our lives. We have to give up good to get better, to get the best. And so for me, it maybe was good at the time for me, just to allow me to be able to get in college and not miss out on so many opportunities with people my own age. But then it wasn't good anymore, and the best option for me was to remove my leg. And so then literally 6 weeks later, I was up and running, which is just unheard of. And I would, I don't have any medical reason why that happened that fast, but it just did.
So how many surgeries in total, Scott?
So it was 26 eventual surgeries. The 26th one was to take off the left leg below the knee.
And that last surgery was how long ago?
The last surgery was in June 22nd, 1998.
And
so a long time ago.
I have read this, and we include your book, Unthinkable, in all of the care packages that we send around the country for our nonprofit, because your story, obviously the just radiance of positivity and joy and life and gratitude and connection and just wisdom, and I mean, I could just keep going, Scott, but I don't want your head to be too big to fit out the door. So I could just keep talking about the beautiful characteristics about you that drove me to want to read about some of this story. But everybody, it just raves. I mean, just the place it picks them out of, the things that are relatable to everybody across the board, able-bodied or not able-bodied, and just the perspective and the hope that you share, both in person on very small scales every day, just individual interactions that I bear witness to your book, and just selflessly all the time trying to improve the quality of life of other people and education about the adoptive community. It's pretty cool. So if you guys haven't looked up Unthinkable, it's an incredible journey and a really good read. But I also wanted to thank you. I also wanted to talk quickly about how we met. Folks might wonder how I came to know such an incredible human, and so I want to take the second to brag a little bit about how we know each other, and and kind of what we're up to and what's in store. And so I'll let you kind of take the ball on that.
I read your story online and was impressed by your journey, especially your background with a cheerleading background and a PA, being a PA, and then having this happen. And so I wanted to know more about it, because I probably at least once a week somebody sends me an article about somebody and said, hey, this is a person that's a new amputee, would you reach out to them? And so I do the best I can to reach out to that person, and just, hey, if you need somebody to talk to, or you need some resources, then I can help direct you in the right way. And so I just reached out to you and sent you a book, and then it coming full circle is when you were able to do your athletic events and really make a lot of headway. We were able to meet at an amputee conference, and then I was able to introduce you to one of my friends, Jay, that had lost his arms and legs, and so you were able to be a great resource to him and his family, because I knew that with your medical background and then also just your experience as an amputee, that you'd be a great resource to them. And he's a shining success because of your investment and in him.
I'm honored that you say that. He's got that just I could just stammer about how incredible the cloth of his willpower is, but I'm so grateful that you pulled me into that family, and it all seems very serendipitous, right? Or oriented, or put in line. I mean, just the series of things that have occurred to make you aware of me as an entity, just how lucky that is. But then also, you've done some mentoring with folks in the adaptive community that have gone on to speak or create foundations. And I had spoken to you at the inception of Less Leg, More Heart, really when it was conceptual. And you were part of sort of the founding team of advisors that helped me get my bearings around what I needed to do, what I wanted to do, how I wanted to trim the fat off the meat, and gave me some really vital pieces that I think allowed for me to start more successfully than most did. I mean, you've made a living on public speaking, and I had a number of public speaking engagements early in my adaptive life that I was, appropriately like, how do I relay this message? I have such a story to tell, but I want to make sure it's not just a story that's sad. I want it to mean something, and you do such a good job at showing that meaning and making people feel those things when they walk away from anything that they see of yours. So thank you for all your mentorship and guidance. And so you're here, you flew in from Atlanta, you just got off the plane, and I suckered you into coming up to support my charity and at our event. Yeah. So
well, I'm happy to be here because like I said earlier, I've run the Boston Marathon for 6 years in a row, and I have been in the New England area. I've spoken in this area, and that one of the things that I saw is there's such a critical need for a nonprofit like yours to minister to the general public and help the amputee community in this area kind of get the resources that even though your amputation was years later than mine, you were still somewhat kind of scrambling around for, knowledge and people to try to help you along the way. And so there is a critical need for a nonprofit like yours in this area, and that's not being addressed.
Well, your presence to be here to support it, you saying that, highlighting it, for the folks that are watching are either disabled or able-bodied, right? Those are the two clumps we fall into. And I had mentioned last segment that it's not a matter of if it's going to be relevant to folks watching, it's a matter of when. And we hope that some of the seeds have been planted where you remember those folks that didn't have legs on this TV segment, and you point folks in our direction, Less Leg, More Heart, if they are struggling, if they are going to lose a limb, if they've just lost a limb, so that we can help with, Scots are behind me. I've got a tribe of beautiful, wonderful people that have gone through so many things in life that help us to pull resources and help us to spread hope and decrease suffering. And we want to be able to help those Tinas, who was just there 5 years ago. As of last week, it was my 5-year ampiversary, because as Scott mentioned, as someone that is a medical clinician, white collar, well-educated, good support system, I still had a really hard time. And everybody doesn't have to have that hard of a time. So thank you for recognizing that. But we're going to throw some bags tomorrow. We're going to do cornhole, and we're going to be on the same team, which is probably not good for you because I'm not very good at cornhole. Are you?
I'm not very good at it.
Oh, you know what?
Yep.
We're gonna.
It'll be fun.
We'll win the Spirit Award.
We'll be on the fun team.
Yeah, we could actually, if we get really bad, we'll just sit and start throwing them out of our legs, so people don't judge us so hard. But so I wanted to just mention the Cornhole tournament that's on 101A. It's White Birch Brewery. It's in Nashua, New Hampshire, and it's 12 to 6. We're gonna have tons of fun. Barbecue truck inside, Tide truck outside. We're gonna have custom beer labeled Less Leg, More Heart variety packs that are for sale. Portion of all of the beer is going to go to us. Of course, some of the winnings from the cornhole tournament comes to us, and also we have raffles, huge prizes, $5,000 cash giveaway, tons of tens of thousands. I think we've got thousands of dollars of giveaways actually tomorrow to give away. So if you just come and buy a $20 ticket, you've already done your job to help the community with disabilities. But if you just want to come meet Scott, we've got books that are going to be there. We've got Wiggles and Giggles. My son Wade, 8-month-old, will be passed around there, a little cherub to brighten your spirits. So we're really going to have a lot of fun and hopefully raise a lot of funds and just keep spreading the mission that suffering is optional, and that we as a community and as one can get through these hardships a little less on the struggle bus. So Scott, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you for flying in. Thank you for making breakfast for me this weekend. Didn't you said right you're going to do that? I'm just going to rope some things in there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you guys are looking for more information on Scott, you can look at our website. We'll have him featured our social media as well. But also just Google anywhere Scott Rigsby and everything comes up because everyone knows him. So awesome. Thank you, and we'll talk to you guys next time.